then don't do it that way. If we do not have the ability to screen this out, you know, I was struck by the fact that people are aghast that they might not be able to carry on the dozens of carry-on bags. You know, if you go into certain department stores, I forget which one it is in New York, the employees come in with little clear plastic bags. I mean, we're willing to subject employees at department stores to protect the designer shoes, and the employees come in clear plastic bags. There are ways around this, and we have to admit that.
Mary, I'm sorry to have to cut you off. We really appreciate the information you've given us today, but we got to cut in and go to a news conference that the mayor of the city of New York is holding right now. Let's drop in there. Thanks for your time.
That's right. Let's go right now to that press conference. New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani speaking now.
Process that we're following. That is, when the medical examiner is able to identify the remains as a body, then they'll be identified, they'll be numbered basically for identification. We have 94 of those. 94 where we have bodies for identification. 46 of those 94 have actually been identified. And then we have the gruesome and horrible situation that in many cases we recover only parts of bodies. And we have 70 category. So there's 94 bodies, 70 body parts. And I'm sorry that I have to describe it that way, but that's unfortunately the situation that we're facing. We have 4,763 people on the missing persons list. That's a list that's as inclusive as we can make it. It includes the plane itself, the manifest. It includes people that have been identified to us by family members. It includes the information we've been able to glean from businesses who are looking for people that they believed were working and they haven't been able to make contact with. But that's the list that we're working with right now. It could turn out that we recover fewer than that. It could be more. We don't know the answer to that yet. We have set up now a permanent family center at the Armory on Lexington Avenue and 26th Street. It began operating at 8 a.m. This morning, and it will continue to operate until midnight tonight, and then it will operate every single day. Yesterday, we registered over 2,000 families, and therefore, if you are looking for someone that you believe is missing as a result of the attack on the World Trade Center, that's the place to come to register, to bring identifying data, and we'll do everything we can to help you. The city is still closed, 14th Street South. Our objective today is to try to get it open, a good deal of it open, for midnight tonight, literally, really for tomorrow morning. And we will be working to open it down to Canal Street, and then to open also other selected areas so we can create corridors into the Wall Street area. We'll continue to keep West Street closed all the way down. We'll continue to keep probably a street parallel to West Street closed, and possibly the FDR Drive. We're not sure yet. But tomorrow the city will be open, certainly down to Canal Street, and then selected portions further down. And obviously a lot of the work today will be designed to try to get that done by midnight tonight. There are a number of other things, but I'm sure it'll come up in the questions. Again, I want to thank very much the governor and the state and the federal government. We finished our meeting this morning and were able to coordinate many things that would be impossible.
We have been listening to New York Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, who has been giving us some updated numbers right now which show the situation that the recovery workers there are now facing. He says that they are working now with a list of 4,763 missing persons. That number includes the people who are on the planes, people who are in businesses, and other family members who have been calling in looking for folks who they believe were in that area. They have recovered 94 bodies, and they have them identified right, or numbered to be identified. 94 bodies numbered. 46 of them have already been identified. And they now have, as he says, 70 different body parts that they are working for. Those are grim figures, to be sure. And we will keep an eye on, an ear open for the new information on that as it does come out. But for now, let us go to London. And CNN's Christiane Amanpour, who's standing by now for more live coverage. Christiane?
Well, Leon, good afternoon from London. As you know, the United States has been trying to marshal its allies, both political and potentially military support, in dealing with what happened in the United States on Tuesday. The allies have been calling this an attack not just on the United States, but also on the whole of the civilized and democratic world. Joining us now from Paris is the French President Jacques Chirac, who is giving his first interview on this matter. Mr. President, thank you for joining us from France. Can you say now to the American people, to the American president, that you and that France stands foursquare, fully committed behind what the U.S. plans to do and what the U.S. is going through right now?
Vous savez, le peuple français a été véritablement traumatisé par ces événements. Une infinie tristesse, une immense émotion. La violence des images d'abord, ces photos d'hommes, de femmes, d'enfants cherchant un être cher disparu,
they loved who disappeared, and showing us their despair and their fear. All of that has touched the French people profoundly. And in fact, there was just a poll that was made in France, and it showed that 96% of the French people show total solidarity for the French people and for the American people and the American authorities. I have never, ever remembered such a unanimity as far as solidarity was concerned. And also, everybody's asking themselves why. How can one answer this question? This kind of madness, this absurdity, this cruelty. And there's no way that one can justify this kind of behavior. And of course, the French people, yes, the French people show total solidarity for the American people.
Mr. President, the United States is trying to build a coalition of allies and of other nations to take sides and act and stand up and be counted on this side of this battle, as they call it. NATO yesterday, for the first time in its history, invoked a clause in its treaty that says an attack on one nation is an attack on all nations. What, in your mind, does that mean for France as it ponders supporting the United States in its response to this? What will France do?
First of all, the Americans are not trying to. I mean, they have certainly obtained unanimity around them in this struggle against terrorism. And it's particularly true with regard to NATO. And, in fact, that was demonstrated last night at the meeting that took place, the NATO meeting that took place last night. And in fact, I had already talked about it with President Bush, who'd called me 1 or 2 hours beforehand. And I, of course, confirmed that we also would show solidarity with regard to the introduction of Article 5 in the North Atlantic Treaty. And of course, that means that France certainly will show solidarity to the Americans. And of course, all NATO countries have done so, and I imagine almost all countries throughout the world.
Mr. President, can I press you on that? France was part of the Gulf War Coalition. France was part of the Balkan Coalition. If the United States decides that it has intelligence that leads it to take military action, will France contribute to that military action in any way?
France, I'd like to repeat, will be totally supportive. We will show our solidarity. Of course, we'll have to examine the situation. We'll have to see who's culpable. And after all, in the United States, a great effort is being made, and I think, in fact, it's being done very efficiently. You're trying to search, trying to look at all the various indices, and trying to determine precisely, specifically, who is at the origin of this murdering folly. And once we found, then of course France will stand with the United States.
The United States president has described this as an attack, basically a battle between good and evil, and that the United States will win this battle and that good will eventually triumph. Do you see it in those terms?
I have no doubt for a single moment that terrorism, which is always based on fanaticism, blindness and madness, terrorism certainly does represent in today's world evil. And, of course, we must win over it with the greatest of energy.
Do you see this, Mr. President, as a clash of civilizations, of not just an attack on the United States or on democracies, but something even more profound?
I won't talk about shock to civilization, because after all it would mean that a certain type of civilization could adopt terrorism as a means, as a normal and natural means of expression, as a kind of culture. I don't want to envisage that anyone, that any human being organized within a civilization could adopt such a stance. And so therefore I believe that terrorism really represents the action of results of certain civilizations. And so therefore I believe that it's got to be considered as being an aberration that's got to be removed from worldwide civilization, which of course has to respect human rights.
You and other world leaders, including, of course, the United States, have described what happened here as a monumental atrocity. But, of course, many people in some parts of the world have said that this is an attack on elements of U.S. foreign policy. It's no secret that France has sometimes been at odds with the U.S. over aspects of foreign policy. Will that cause any obstacles to you and to France as you consider joining a coalition and taking any measures that the United States and allies deem necessary?
Well, one doesn't necessarily have to be always in agreement on everything, because after all, that's a typical characteristic within all families, and we're talking about international family as all families. However, on the other hand, there's one area where there can be no difference of opinion, where there can be no divergence, and that is the need to fight against this perverse illness, this vice, which is terrorism, represented in terrorism. And of course, in that area, there's absolutely no divergence, no difference with regard to the attitude of France, with regard to the attitude of all civilized countries, whatever their religious, their economic, their philosophical backgrounds, and United States.
Mr. President, one final question.
And in fact, I also know that almost all... May I just ask one last question?
Do you believe that military response will be necessary, that this act of terrorism has forced the hand of not only the United States, but the rest of the allies and democracies who've said that they must stand united against this?
The United States was targeted, has been targeted, and the United States has been the first victim of this phenomenon, in which the whole world, in fact, is involved. But the United States is the first victim. And so it's for the United States, and it's what the United States is doing, to determine from whence comes this attack. And then, when that has been done, then the necessary things will have to be done to try to eradicate this evil. And of course, France will certainly be at its side. The means that will be deployed by the Americans, well, it's not for me to prejudge that. It's up to the United States to decide that. But what I can say to you is that as far as eradicating terrorism, as far as fighting against terrorism, France, as I am sure most countries throughout the world, we